Hi, so my name is Jason Hughes, Sergeant with the Kingston Police. Been here since 2004. So Kingston Police had been experiencing higher call volumes for quite some time in early 2024 as they relate to issues surrounding big societal issues, including homelessness, mental health concerns, and individuals struggling with addictions. Unfortunately, these categories are often combined, making life very difficult for those affected. The root causes of these issues are varied and numerous and are generally things that the police can positively impact or solve on our own. Also, unfortunately, can lead to increased crime and disorder and a lower semblance of public safety in the areas of our community. As such, Kingston Police at the senior administration level looked at starting a pilot project of having a designated officer assigned to assist with dealing with some of these issues. So I was approached in the end of June 2024. And at that point, as it was mentioned, there was a higher call volume, and bylaw was looking for assistance in dealing with these encampments. So in the early steps, it was doing a lot with bylaw, attending these encampments. Quickly realized it was more of a two-officer response due to the number of calls and going into these areas. So at that point, my partner, Constable Wills, he was added to the unit.
Okay, thanks for having us and allowing us talk to you, the board, a bit about this. So I mean, I was flattered to be asked to join Jason in this endeavor to try and combat the issues that were going on downtown. And I'll just talk a bit about some of the issues that were brought to our attention downtown. A lot of it came from the Downtown Business Association. And there was many complaints that came in from members of the community that were living near these encampments and were dealing with the problems that these encampments brought. So some of the problems, and I won't go into all of them, so I'll be here for an hour, is there was many unhoused individuals sleeping on the streets and sidewalks of downtown Kingston. There was a lot of open drug use right on the streets of downtown Kingston, Princess Street, Brock Street, and right even literally on the steps of the businesses. There was a time when I personally was walking downtown doing a beat job downtown for a day, and I stepped in a storefront to take a phone call, and as I turned around, there was an unhoused male fast asleep or passed out between these benches, and I was on the phone and I was going to deal with this, and then I watched a woman walk by with her two young kids. This was in the last summer, and they turned around. They were startled. They jumped, and they jumped, and I thought to myself, man, like something's got to be done here. Like this is, something had to be done. And shortly after that, I joined the unit, and so when Jay and I started working in this unit, we first thought, how are we going to try and combat? Like, what are the main problems here, and how are we going to try and combat this? A lot of unhoused people were on the downtown streets, like I said, using drugs and pushing grocery carts and with all their belongings and things on them. And so we thought, let's just start tackling the issues as we see them right here. And that would be first off, seizing these grocery carts because they are stolen property, and we were returning them to the store owners, and who were grateful for this because these things are worth $500 each, and so they were happy to get these things back. We didn't want to lay charges because we knew that the homeless people having these things were already facing a lot of challenges, so we didn't want to try and make their life worse. But in the same token, we had to take enforcement, and we had to get these things back to the store owners. I think to date, we've seized just over 80 carts from downtown and gotten them back to store owners. And one of the other things we've had to do is we've had to actually lay charges in some of these cases. Many of the unhoused people we dealt with were they would give these up and it was fine, and they had other. We helped them get other means of transporting their goods around, but in some cases we had to take enforcement, and that was always the last issue. We've laid to date over 25 criminal charges for possession of stolen property, mischief, causing disturbance, people yelling and screaming downtown and scaring people, and we've seen a bit of a difference. The calls to the downtown area are down since Jay and I started this, are down 40% since August of last year. Oh, no, that wasn't just us. We have another other officer in our unit as well, a beat officer, and so yeah, collectively, we've seen the calls for service are down 40%. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and we're chipping away at it. And I'll give you guys a couple of quick stats that we've had, and we've built relationships up with other community agencies, such as the Downtown Business Association, bylaw. We're working very closely with bylaw to tackle some of these issues. So there's been 13 community standards bylaw tickets that have been issued. That's basically for people that are using and having drug paraphernalia in and around parks in the city. Last summer and into the fall was particularly bad at the Memorial Center. I know there was town meetings called the Memorial Center, the city councilor there. So we've put a lot of resources and focused, and there was it ended up being a lot of enforcement. I think within a month or so, we started to see the things settle down there, and people go elsewhere, and not there's problems with leaving garbage around, and the drug paraphernalia right beside the park where kids are playing. So yeah, there was 17 bylaw tickets issued, another 23 bylaw tickets issued. This is from Jason and I for garbage being left behind at the parks, and we had over 100 calls for service to deal with encampments, like encampments only. I believe it's 109. That figure may be slightly low because we didn't have a coding system at the time when we were dealing with a lot of these encampments, and we didn't have a coding system at the time. Since the coding system, I believe it's 109 calls that we've done with encampments, and we've been able to either shut down or move every single one of them. It's taken partnerships with the city. It's taken the landowners, but we've been able to move every single encampment. Yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing in a nutshell. We could probably talk for the whole meeting, but we won't. And then I know we've worked closely with Councillor Ridge about the Adelaide shelter. Things were going on there. Things have seemed to settle down there. I know they're not perfect, but we're always at your beck and call if you need us, and you have our numbers, and we're happy to work for you. Anybody have any questions about what we've been doing? Or
yeah.
So
it sounds that now that you're involved on the street, on the beat,
that
you're kind of setting guidelines, and then people that are homeless are somewhat respecting those guidelines, which is why there's less calls and things like that.
I think as Clint said, we've tried kind of like a tiered approach, because it is a lot of the same people we deal with over and over. So we've talked to them, we've kind of explained things to them, then you warn them, then you issue tickets or PONs, and then if it keeps continuing, then we look at laying charges. These aren't the criminal charges. These aren't the crime of the century, but allows us to put some conditions on them, maybe to limit access to areas downtown, or maybe that they can't have a shopping cart in the possession. But it helps us set some boundaries if somebody's just not getting it over and over.
Which is not a bad thing. If you're asking people to move their encampments where they live, where are you asking them to move to?
Well, for last summer, we're working with bylaw, because they were going around leaving their notices about them taking the tents down a half hour after sunrise, half hour after sunset. So we would go around after they had done that and try and make sure people realize, listen, you got to take this tent down. We were encouraging to go in behind the Bell Park area, saying there's resources there for you. There's people that'll feed you. There's the care hub is there if you need help with addictions or mental health, there is resources there, and that's kind of a spot you can go. Obviously, there's some people that don't want to go there just because of the reputation it has with the violence and stuff. I think personally, from what we've seen, it has gotten a little bit better there since they've kind of set up the fences and shut it down a bit. But I know there's still a lot of encampments in behind it. Um, but we've kind of been telling people that's probably somewhere you can go for now, where there are some resources that can help you.
To piggyback on that, I think one of the things we've done is traditionally there hasn't been the best relationship between some of the care hub stuff that goes on at the care hub, whether it's the residents, the employers, and the police, and we've seen that. And when Jay and I were putting this together, we thought we need to change that. We need to fix that, make that relationship better, and we did do that. We did it to the point where the staff started calling us personally to help deal with some of the issues of violence they had. Many of the residents or clients they had at the care hub were vulnerable for various reasons, and people would go in and prey upon them, like there'd be predators, other criminals, and some of these criminals we knew. So we actually developed a relationship with them that they felt comfortable calling us and providing detailed statements, and we had a couple handfuls of them arrested and charged, and they haven't been a problem there since. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I kind of piggyback more onto what he was saying.
It does.
What things we're doing.
Yeah, it's good work.
Yeah, nice.
Did you have a question, Christian? Greg? Go ahead, Greg.
Thank you, and through you, and thank you very much for the presentation. So you had mentioned that you work in partnership with Kingston Bylaw, for example. In any of the work that you've detailed, are you also working in partnership with Street Outreach or Kingston housing staff to help individuals identify any potential resources or anything like that?
Yes, we are. We're working with Ontario when it comes to the issues of the unhoused moving their things around in these grocery carts. We've actually taken a lot of their stuff in our vehicle, brought them and their stuff up to Ontario Works, and we've helped them get bins, secure bins to keep their stuff in, so they don't have the struggles of trying to, carry all this stuff downtown. That's one agency we've worked with. We've worked with Lionhearts over at Adelaide Shelter to try and come up with of ways of them. There was a lot of problems at Adelaide Shelter. There was, as you know, the garbage. There was violence, and it was kind of turning into what the care hub was on a smaller scale. And we worked with Lionhearts and the Adelaide Shelter to try and get things straightened out there. So far, I know the weather's changing and things are going to become a little busier again, but I think from the fall or the winter, we certainly helped settle that down. Those are a couple agencies we work with.
Also, with it, we've been able to get some into Safe Beds, which is a place that'll provide some of them with basically their own apartment and food and resources. As Clint said, we encourage them to go to the shelters or use the shelters. Cam and I were able to get a lady into Dawn House, again, to provide some alternatives. We try and help the ones that we can that are looking, but there's some that don't want the help. They just refuse to take it, right? But
Go ahead, Christian.
First, thanks for the work that you're doing. This is heartbreaking and really tough work, right? On the one hand, working with some of the most vulnerable people in the community. On the other hand, making the judgments called that you have to make every day about what's the appropriate enforcement measures to take and how you balance the individual vulnerability with the public interest. So, my great respect goes out to you for what you're doing. Can we, Chief, can we track those investments? I know we always like to talk in terms of call volumes, but I think for the purpose of our budget deliberations, it would actually be more helpful if we can show, okay, putting an officer in here, that this is the cost of the officer and the hours. But in return, here's the total cost that reduced in terms of the strain on police service. Maybe we can even get the costing from other agencies, like whether we can get the paramedics or fire, just to show that we are making strategic investments that are having a strategic effect on the community, not just kind of pulling people off the streets or whatever and charging them or whatnot. So, and I think that might be a helpful, Councillor Ridge, tell me, but I think that would be a helpful, I think this in particular, because this issue has been so controversial. I think if we come to budget deliberation, we can show this as a case study of how we make deliberate investments to achieve strategic effects that reduce our overall financial costs, but also the outcomes for individuals and the outcomes for the communities. It helps us on this narrative of shifting away from just asking for increase in the police budget and showing these are investments in our community and they generate real payoff for our community. We can measure those payoffs, and they pay benefits in terms of allowing us then to allocate our resources in different ways by reducing the calls. And here's what sort of the financial impact is. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yep. Yes, for sure. And it's really important because I know Jay talked about the day he started, which is good because we have a starting point. And a lot of times there's never a starting point. So we, just like with the DBIA, when we put the beat officer down in May of the previous year, we're able to measure that. So what we did is we provided council with a really in-depth look at a geographic location. And we used the care hub, for example, and measuring all the calls for service in that care hub, pre-beat officer, post-beat officer. And now what we're going to do, because these two officers are virtually assigned to this duty 100% of their time. There is sometimes they're called to assist with other pressing matters of the day, but that's generally for a temporary period of time. So we know the effectiveness of A, the beat officer, and then B, when we add these two. So in June of this year, we'll have a year of statistics that we'll be able to really focus, certainly to look, and part of our strategic plan being, of course, reducing some of the call volume in the downtown area by 10%. We're looking at that. And then we're also looking at, it's difficult with encampments because it's obviously Mother Nature helps out a lot of the time in the winter. We don't have as many complaints, and then April and May, they start again. So being able to compare last year to this year in a statistical sense, and we're just actually dealing with our in-house analyst, trying to break down by electoral district in the city what the calls for service are in each of those each of those districts. So trying to compare. And really for us, I guess there is that call that's where, we see, is there a reduction in calls, or have people just stopped calling because they've become accustomed to it? But that's certainly one avenue that we're looking at on the strategic front. And we certainly know that not applying a resource to it, when the calls come in, we're also measuring the complaints, because we're able to measure people still aren't happy. And, but we're seeing less people unhappy, and we're receiving less complaint calls because we have an answer and we're able to respond, versus saying, hey, we're in the queue, priorities, and when we get there, we can get there. And we're still far from perfect. Don't get me wrong on that. But
I'm just trying to, can we shift our mentality from, so the calls are important. That's one important metric, but can we shift? So we put 3 officers in there. So that's our financial investment. This is what this is costing us. Before we had 100 calls. On average, we know each call takes this many hours. Maybe we by reducing the calls, we've won, like, here's the financial benefit to the organization. But maybe we can also say, for the other calls, we've been able to reduce the amount of time that the officer spends because we have better collaborations with the community. We have places where we can take folks. I'm just saying, can we put some numbers on this? I think for me would be can we basically make the business case that this is a good investment for our community. It's good investment for individuals. And we can show the value for money to our taxpayers. I think that's how we need to win people over, when we say, like, look, this is the increase, whatever, who knows, you might be going in and say, we want to build on this strategy, but building on this strategy is going to cost this. But here's what you got last year. here's what you're going to get this year for X. Like that's just kind of what I'm trying to think about. The other piece that I wanted to commend you on is, and I wonder whether we can even be strategic about this, right? So that much of the criminal code isn't about arresting people. It's about drawing red lines, right? Here's behavior that society will not tolerate. And for people who struggle sort of on the margins, obviously they have trouble with the red lines. So I think these sort of, like, as you were talking, I was thinking about this, like like, can we have sort of even like an enforcement sort of escalation sort of mechanisms that we can draw up and we can show people when we engage with people, here's what we ask them to do, right? Walk them, so we can walk the public through kind of in terms of here's our approach to what we're trying to do and how we sort of that when somebody gets a ticket or somebody gets arrested, here's the 14 things we already did before that kind of thing. So we can make it very clear that, and because once we can articulate that as sort of an SOP, we can also, I think, present that to the public that it's not the cops laying down the law kind of thing, but there's actually a strategy that we've developed, and that this is like there's a lot of things that you try to do before we ever get to this. And it might also help other officers responding when you're not on shift or so, if they understand, like, what's the escalation ladder kind of thing at work here. And anyways, I just thought that was really interesting how you do this, because there's lots of criminology literature on this, that's exactly how you go about it, like these very small measures in trying to make people realize what the lines are. Because I think even vulnerable people, once you lay out the lines, most of them sort of will, you tell me, but I find like usually people's behavior does adjust when you tell them like, you can't do this.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
thanks.
I like that the police are trying to make sense of a situation that's national. And it's just really a Band-Aid, but we're going to put a dollar amount on it and see if we can like somehow keep it organized. But until municipal, provincial, and federal governments work together, nothing's going to change. So I'm glad that you guys are doing this and it's helpful to the municipality. Oh, Gail, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. One of the things that I heard is the emphasis that you're placing on relationships, both with the individuals who are vulnerable, but also all of the community partners and the work that you're doing in this. To Christian's point, when you are talking about or providing us with a narrative or numbers or so on, that information is also, in my view, extremely important, because it's those relationships with the people who are on the street, and the people who are doing their best to support them. And to your point, not everybody wants that, but for those who do, it would be really great to have a way of just even within the narrative saying the number of diversions essentially, or the support of this person going to Dawn House and things like this. These are, you know, for you, it's one person, but it probably means everything, to that one person, to have someone care. And so again, like you say, what you're doing is a lot of community relationship work that I think is so critical, because it also sends a message that of who we are as a service and what we think about as far as providing a safe community for everyone. And so again, to pile on the kudos, but again, those relationships you're developing are critical. Codify them in some way. Make sure they're clearly articulated in your narrative, because in the end, that's what's going to make the difference, bottom line, in my view.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with that completely. Probably the most important thing here is the relationships that we have to build, because this isn't a Kingston police problem, and it's not a vulnerable person's problem. This is a community problem, and there's a lot of stakeholders in on this, and people got to work together. Not everybody works together as well as we hope for, but it's getting better. It really is getting better, and we're seeing the difference because of it. So.
And just to piggyback on that, I want to just say thanks to both of you for us having a consistent approach. That makes it a lot better. And I know that both Jay and Clint, you can hear compassion, empathy, all of these things are trying to do. But on a daily basis, we have to understand too, there's people who just hate the police and they hate authority. And the daily stuff, they're out trying to help someone and people will come by and start insulting them. And they take it in stride every day. And it's just misinformed, uneducated people that don't understand you want to fight and just fight police, that's fine. But really what they're doing is they're offering, a lot of the times they're offering, and don't take their shopping cart. Well, the business who had lost their shopping cart, they spent money on that. It's their property. But you hear they're actually driving the people and their property to get a bin because there is an alternative. And even when some people hear that's happening, I know they still take it out on you because they want their narrative to carry on. But please keep up the work. Don't be discouraged by it. Because like I say, the misinformed are the misinformed, and it's unfortunate, and you'll never educate them. So just keep doing what you're doing, and thank you.
Board, thanks you, Jason, Clint. That was very informational. Thank you. All right. Thanks for all you do. Okay, onwards. Is there a disclosure of a conflict of interest? Nope. Then I'll have an approval of the agenda. Gail, Christian, all in favor? Thank you. And if I can get the adoption of the minutes for meeting 2504 held March 20th, 2025 be adopted. Greg, Christian, all in favor? Thank you. Communications, the following communications from the Inspector General of Policing, Ontario Association of Police Services Boards, the Canadian Association of Police Governance, the Ministry of Solicitor General, the Ontario Human Rights Commission, the Canadian Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement be received by the board. Very good. Greg, Gail, all in favor? Thank you. Is there any questions to any of these communications? No? Okay. Then I am going to invite a delegation, Heather Passard-Nadeau, and ask her to speak on what she'd like to present to the board. Hi, how are you? Very good, thank you. And I think Lori has mentioned you have 10 minutes, and please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Heather Poussard-Nadeau, and I am a proud member of this community. I'm also a graduate student worker at Queen's University and a member of Public Service Alliance of Canada, PSAC Local 901. PSAC 901 began legal strike action on March 10, 2025. I'm here to raise some concerns about the perception of Kingston Police on the PSAC 901 picket line, and importantly, the consequences of this perception. To be clear, I'm not here speaking on behalf of the union in any way. I am here today as a concerned citizen. I am not part of the union's executive, nor have I been given permission to speak on the union's behalf. I volunteer as a strike captain on the picket line, and I have been on the line most mornings for the first 5 weeks of the strike. I'm sharing what I have witnessed and what others have reported to me about their experiences with the Kingston Police. My first concern is the way Kingston Police have communicated their role in labor disputes. Due to the lack of clear and consistent messaging, picketers feel uneasy about how Kingston Police is enforcing the law on the picket line. Police have an important role in managing safe and peaceful demonstrations in our community. Currently, the only certainty picketers have is found on the board's policy manual, which broadly states that the police will enforce the law during labor disputes. Although the letter of the law is often plainly stated in statutes, an officer's discretion in interpreting and enforcing those statutes is complicated by their obligation to protect the constitutional rights underpinning labor disputes. To create certainty for their communities, police departments across Ontario have adopted specific protocols and guidelines regarding strikes and protest. These protocols are effective because they clearly communicate how the police are addressing this complicated interaction. Regrettably, Kingston Police's strikes and protests webpage is not as comprehensive as others and does not adequately describe formally adopted procedures that community members can rely on. For example, Toronto and Durham clearly explain the roles and responsibilities of PLTs during labor disputes. Kingston's webpage has no direct reference to the PLTs, and the specific PLT webpage has no explicit reference to labor disputes. The role and responsibilities of Kingston's PLT in labor disputes has become increasingly unclear over the last 6 weeks. We have had the pleasure to work with a friendly and competent Kingston Police liaison. Unfortunately, our liaison has very limited availability and is frequently engaged in other duties. As a result, our PLT does not often accompany police attending the line or respond to our inquiries promptly. There has been at least one instance where the liaison was engaged in other liaising work, but failed to follow up with the union later on. None of this was initially communicated with picketers who were under the impression that they could rely on the PLT as their main point of contact. Even when available, PLTs are limited in operating as channels of communication between the police and organization leaders. Our PLT made it clear they are a safe person to talk to. However, when union representatives raised concerns over security misconduct on the picket line, the PLT said it was not within their role to take these complaints. This seems to contradict the publicly available information on the Kingston Police website. Additionally, police officers routinely state that they are not required to notify the PLT when they attend the picket line. There does not seem to be an attempt by officers to use the PLT in non-emergency situations, including when issuing informal warnings or other communications with picketers. At least one officer indicated they were not aware a PLT was assigned to this labor dispute at all. All of this uncertainty undermines the community's trust in the PLT program. Turning now to the actual guidelines on the strikes and protests webpage, Kingston stands apart from others in that all guidelines are labeled as suggested. It is difficult for picketers to engage in peaceful picketing that avoids interactions with police when these guidelines are only suggested. For example, one suggested guideline states that, quote, Kingston police officers do not set time limits as to how long picketers may delay vehicles from entering or exiting the premises, end quote. PSAC 901 strike protocol state vehicles can be delayed for a maximum of 5 minutes for the purposes of distributing information. These protocols have been shared with the employer and the Kingston PLT. The suggested guidelines state disagreements between the involved parties should be directed to the Labor Relations Board or the courts. However, in the course of our strike, these suggested guidelines have not been followed. One officer said a reasonable time to delay is 15 minutes, another said 50 to 55 minutes, and another said that any delay is unreasonable. Recently, picketers were told by officers that any traffic disruption would result in arrest. I hope the board agrees that this conduct is concerning because the board's policy manual states that the chief of police must establish procedures on providing information to the public during a labor dispute. It is important that they are consistently followed and communicated by officers, otherwise it creates uncertainty that could erode the public's confidence and the trusting relationship between police and the community. The inconsistent communication of this policy contributes to general concerns of picketers related to the police's impartiality. I want to raise these concerns because community members feel the chief of police procedures are not being applied equally. To begin, the language on the strikes and protest page is not neutral. A yellow box titled Labor Disputes describes how union execs and picket captains are responsible for knowing their, quote, legal obligations and responsibilities of policing the behavior of their members at labor disputes, end quote. Nowhere does the webpage describe the obligations and responsibilities of employers to manage the behavior of their executives and representatives. This creates a perception that it is only the actions of picketers that need to be policed, or worse, that the employer is either not present on the line or does not engage in actions that would need to be policed. Kingston Police has an ongoing relationship with Queen's University campus security. This is a necessary and positive relationship to ensure that events like St. Patrick's Day are safe. But this is a labor dispute, not homecoming. Queen's special relationship with the police should not extend to the regulation of labor disputes. The management of this picket line is a clear conflict of interest for Queens and their security teams. The continuation of this relationship is evident through an email dated March 17th from Chris Scott, head of Queen's Campus Security, to Chief Razor regarding St. Patrick's Day weekend and the PSAC strike. This email was distributed at the last board meeting. I don't know the contents of this email because all of the discussion was focused on St. Patrick's Day and did not address what was said about the labor dispute. But whether this email contained anything inappropriate is not the point. Rather, the email indicates that Queens is continuing to use this relationship for communications about a labor dispute. This board emphasized the significance of teamwork between Queens and Kingston Police when it comes to events like St. Patrick's Day. That the labor dispute was mentioned in seemingly the same context raises a reasonable apprehension of bias. Queens is a party in this labor dispute. I was alarmed when I watched last month's meeting, and there was no mention that it was inappropriate for Queens to use this channel to discuss an ongoing labor dispute and the need to maintain public perceptions of police neutrality in this matter. Perhaps most concerningly, picketers have reported to me that Kingston police officers last week said that someone higher up in Kingston Police said it was time to be harder on picketers. As a result, many members of the community feel like Queens and Kingston Police are on the same team. There are at least 2 private security firms that have been hired by Queen's University to police the picket line. Consistently and increasingly over the last 6 weeks, these security personnel, both uniformed and plainclothed, have been intimidating and harassing students for merely associating with the union. Graduate students engaged in their studies are reporting that their privacy is being violated by security demanding to search their person. Additionally, students have been denied entry or followed when they attempt to enter any Queens building wearing union symbols and logos, including to washrooms, labs and classrooms, student wellness, the Interfaith Center, and their own on-campus homes. Additionally, there have been multiple instances where security have used force against peaceful picketers. I personally have felt extremely unsafe around security because they carry weapons, and I have witnessed them approach various people engaged in peaceful actions on the picket line while holding their weapons. I and others have found this conduct threatening and very scary. Actions of security are now extending beyond campus. For instance, on Monday, security followed picketers for several blocks after packing up for the day. Picketers asked them to stop, and they said no because they were instructed to follow the picketers and they were on public property. Unfortunately, police conduct suggests that their special relationship with Queens has continued throughout the strike. In one instance, a Kingston police officer insisted that there was no difference between a picketer and a protester, and that the person suggesting that there was a difference was arguing semantics. The officer's refusal to acknowledge the difference is concerning because it suggests a dismissive attitude towards people's charter rights and the values those rights protect. To date, no picketers have been arrested or charged with any illegal action by Kingston police, and the only violence I have observed on the picket line has been perpetuated by security. Nevertheless, officers called to the picket line do not practice de-escalation and do not adequately investigate the situation before taking action or issuing warnings, including threatening picketers with arrest. In contrast, immediately after engaging with picketers, officers will have casual conversations with security, joking around and laughing with them. Picketers see these interactions. Regardless of the intent, these kinds of actions signal to picketers that Kingston police have a special relationship with the very people who abuse them. Consequently, picketers do not feel safe coming to Kingston police with these kinds of concerns, and as mentioned, our one safe person, our PLT, will not take complaints. I have tried in vain to convince a picketer with video evidence of being assaulted by security to report the crime to police. They outright refused because they did not feel safe to do so. Unfortunately, the unintended consequences of police conduct have made community members feel unwelcome, unheard, undervalued, and most importantly, unsafe. I'm confident that Kingston Police would want to work towards remedying even the perception that they are not following the guiding principles of the Kingston Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. In closing, I urge the board to investigate what policies and procedures are in place regarding labor disputes and make more publicly available these protocols. Additionally, I want to make clear that I came here today to start a conversation, not to make accusations. I found myself compelled to exercise my civic duty to bring these issues to your attention because I owe it to my friends, my community, and the values that we all stand for. Lawful picketers do not feel like they matter. My colleagues feel unsafe. I feel unsafe. I implore you to consider what I've presented in good faith and take the steps that this board deems necessary and appropriate to uphold the community's trust of the Kingston Police. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That was really well said and well put together. Thanks for that. How long were you on strike for?
We are still not officially off strike, so we are at the end of week 6.
6 weeks.
Yeah.
And does Queen's University know your concerns for the people that they've hired for security?
We have brought up I'm not like speaking on behalf of the union, so I don't know exactly what's happened sort of from the union to university
Okay, yeah, that's
level.
fair.
But it's like we do talk about it a lot on the lines and have, told security to stop doing things to their face. that doesn't work.
Right. Right. And I can understand how that would be concerning from your viewpoint, Chief, did you want to express anything? No? Okay. Then thank you for your time and thank you for being a great citizen and coming forward and relating this to us. Okay, thanks.
Deputy Guy may have a couple comments here.
Thank you. So just moving on to the Health IM report, which we brought forward 4 months of reporting last month of 2024 and January, February, March, and 25. As you know, we use this integrated app with the hospital to try to track some of our mental health apprehensions. And with our cyber outage, you see the volume of January, February, March being significantly less than December. So it's we're in a bit of recovery, but we feel like our next reporting cycle will kind of capture more of our volume that we've seen in years past. So the one area we're really look at is the wait times at the hospitals, and we've even established that we can do a better job at tracking some of this with the integrated app, and I think we'll see some of those wait times actually be a little bit higher than what they're showing in the reports. The other thing we're really looking to do in 2025 is to address these wait times, is implementing special constables into the front line to, as the new CSPA allows us to do that, to try to relieve some of those frontline officers, getting them back on the streets, back on the road, and dealing with some of the things that we've heard about today already and other matters. So just in a snapshot, wait times are our main area, and our MCERT team does a really great job of lowering those apprehension rates. And the stats prove province-wide that if you have those MCERT teams working in conjunction with police, apprehensions are lower, which means less people at the hospital, which means more officers on the road. So it's a bit of a tiered approach with Health IM, MCERT, and special constables as we move forward to try to achieve some of those areas in our strategic plan.
And we've been watching with a lot of the other services. So, you know, for example, Ottawa has 1 uniform member and 3 special constables at the hospital at all times. Windsor as well, where they have a special constable at all times, literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so we're measuring our wait times, which unfortunately, the way the hospital is designed here, not everyone can be in the same location. So sometimes we have upwards of 6 or 8 officers in different areas of the hospital for prolonged periods of time. And then that trickles down into our response times because, you know, people are calling and saying, where are you? And the priority. So we're evaluating all the time, those in this document. It's not 100% accurate, but it's the best accuracy we can get. And we're, you know, working with our officers to improve that. But it is something we're really working towards because we know that is a big drain. And the issue obviously at the emergency room, and, you know, so we're canvassing on having the Mental Health Act changed and processes changed because that's where the bottleneck is for all of us at the emergency room. And it's like it all fits in with people not having family physicians and using the emergency room as their doctor. And then the police are in, and frankly, they're just overwhelmed. And then you have a big incident, and we've got to be priority. And we understand that, you know, there's a massive incident where life and death is at stake. We will get bumped down the chain, but it's constantly something that we continue to reassess. And we have a great relationship with the hospital and their staff, and they're doing what they can to assist us as well.
Very good. Then we'll move on. This one. Oh, sir. First or seconder, Gail? Greg, all in favor? Thank you. Recommendation reports. Any question from the board members about the policy and bylaw committee can respond maybe? Report number 25-4.
If there are any questions, happy to take them, but otherwise,
Is there anything to report?
not really. No.
Okay. Just that there's a lot of policy being worked on.
There's a significant amount of policy being worked on, and we're very grateful to be one of the boards that has a board administrator to support that activity for the committee members. And to keep this moving forward as we meet the objective of the government to have that done.
Okay. Go ahead.
I guess there's a lot of catch up to do on updating some of our policies, and we heard the benefits today of the work that we can do to make sure that our policies are adequately postured for the times that we live in.
We'll call it a work in progress. That's a lot of work. Yeah. Okay. First or seconder? Greg? Christian, what are we doing? Okay, let's do that. Christian, aye. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, then there's a code of conduct for police services board members policy. That the Kingston Police Services Board adopt a proposed policy on code of conduct for police services board members and attached to report number 25-25, and that the board administrator posts the policy to the board's web pages. First or seconder? Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Ratification of no motions. There's none. Motions. The transfer payment agreement, so that the Kingston Police Services Board enter into an Ontario transfer payment agreement between His Majesty the King in right of Ontario as represented by the Solicitor General and the Kingston Police Service Board with respect to the reduced impaired driving everywhere ride program for a maximum of $38,000 for the funding of 2024 and 2025. That the board authorizes myself or his delegate to enter the transfer payment agreement on behalf of the board. The agreement was attached to the amendum herein and was distributed to the board members on April 16th, 2025. Can I have a motion on that? Thank you. Christian, Greg, all in favor? Thanks. As far as new business, Karen McDonald, Executive Director, Toronto's Drug Checking Service, Ontario's Drug Checking Community. Karen's team have been doing drug recognition testing by users who volunteer samples at safe injection sites in Toronto. They've been running a satellite in Peterborough and they started a satellite in Kingston in November. Would the board be interested in a presentation by Karen in the lead of the Integrated Care Hub regarding this initiative? I say yay. Yes, yep. So all in favor? Thank you. Very good. Then I would ask that we move in camera for the next portion of this meeting. Say we'll take a 5-minute break. And that's it. Thank you. Right, very good. All in favor. Good. Okay.